My wife buried a man I had never heard of. 3 days later, I found out he left my son $400,000. That was the moment I realized my marriage hadn't just been strained. It had been divided, and I had been living in only half of it. She told me it was an old coworker. Said it casually, too casually. "It's not a big deal," she added, tying her shoes by the door. "You wouldn't know anyone." But her eyes were red. Not from allergies. From crying. My wife doesn't cry easily. 32 years of marriage teaches you that. She didn't cry when her father died. She didn't cry when we almost lost the house in 2008. She didn't cry when our daughter moved across the country. But the night before that funeral, she cried in the bathroom for nearly an hour. And she locked the door. I didn't plan to follow her. I'm not a jealous man. At least I never thought I was. But something inside me, something quiet and heavy, told me I needed to see what she wasn't saying. So I waited 15 minutes. Then I drove. The church was small. Brick. Rain hitting the stained glass. I stood in the back pew. She didn't know I was there. And when I saw her face as she looked at the casket, my stomach dropped. She wasn't grieving politely. She was breaking, shoulders shaking, head bowed like something inside her had been torn loose. I had never seen her look at anyone that way. Not even me. Then the pastor said it. He leaves behind a partner who stood by him faithfully for over a decade. Over a decade. My chest tightened. My wife collapsed forward, sobbing into her hands. And that was the moment I understood. I wasn't the only man in her life. I just didn't know I wasn't the main one. After the service, I stayed outside, watched from a distance. An older woman approached her. They hugged, long, intimate, and the woman whispered loud enough for me to hear. "He loved you until the very end. Loved you, not valued you, not appreciated you. Loved." That night I found the letter, folded carefully inside her purse, dated 3 weeks before his death. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And I'm sorry we never told him the truth. I stopped breathing. Never told him what? Then I read the line that shattered me. He raised a son who should have known my name. That sentence didn't just hurt. It destabilized everything. Because I have a son, 22 years old. And suddenly I was questioning the most basic part of my identity. Was I his father? Or had I been the stand-in? That was the beginning, not the end. And what I discovered next didn't just expose an affair. It exposed 12 years of financial entanglement. And something far more painful than betrayal. It exposed invisibility. I didn't sleep that night. When you find out your wife may have loved another man for over a decade, your body doesn't rest. It waits. Waits for proof. Waits for denial. Waits for something solid to hold on to. At 4:18 a.m., I got out of bed and walked into the study. The house felt unfamiliar, like I had walked into someone else's life. I opened my laptop and typed his name again. Not casually this time. Carefully. Methodically. First, there was nothing dramatic. Old business listings. A small construction company. A bankruptcy filing 5 years ago. But then I found a civil case from 10 years earlier. Sealed. Financial dispute. The co-signer's name was partially redacted. But the case number caught my attention. Because 10 years ago we refinanced our home. I remember that refinance clearly. I remember sitting at the dining table signing paperwork while my wife handled most of the details. I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? I pulled up our archived bank statements. Year by year. Slowly. First, it looked normal. Mortgage payments. Utilities. College tuition. Then I saw it. Transfers. Small enough to avoid suspicion. $2,400. $3,800. $5,000. $2,950. Scattered. Inconsistent. But recurring. Over 12 years. I started adding them. And my chest tightened. Over $180,000. Not in one lump sum, but in fragments. Quiet. Strategic. Hidden inside normalcy. It wasn't reckless. It wasn't emotional. It was structured. She hadn't just loved him. She had funded him. and I had unknowingly helped. Then I found something else. A life insurance policy. Updated 3 years ago. Amount, $400,000. Beneficiary, my son. I stared at the screen for a long time. Why would a man leave nearly $500,000 to my child? Unless he believed he had a claim. Unless he believed he was more than just the other man. My hands were shaking when my wife walked into the kitchen later that morning. She looked drained, fragile, like someone who had run out of energy to pretend. How long? I asked. She didn't play confused. 12 years, she said quietly. The honesty hurt more than a lie. It started after we were struggling, she continued. You were working late. We barely talked. I nodded slowly. I remembered that period. I thought I was protecting us, working harder, building security. I didn't realize I was creating space, and someone else stepped into it. Did you love him? I asked. Yes. No hesitation. No excuses. Just truth. It landed like a weight. Is my son his? That was the question I didn't want to ask. Her silence lasted too long. I don't know, she whispered. The room felt smaller, like oxygen had been reduced. I walked to the window, watched the quiet street outside. Mail trucks, neighbors walking dogs. Meanwhile, my entire identity was cracking. Because if my son wasn't biologically mine, then who had I been all these years? I want a DNA test, I said calmly. She nodded. I understand. No fight, no anger, just acceptance. As if she had expected this day to arrive eventually. Telling my son was worse than confronting her. We sat at the kitchen table that night. I explained carefully. Not every detail, just enough. He listened quietly, then asked the question directly. So, he might be my father? I hated hearing that sentence. I don't know, I said. But no matter what, I'm your dad. He looked at me for a long time, then said something that almost broke me. You always have been. The waiting was unbearable. Every memory replayed. Teaching him to ride a bike. Late-night science projects. College visits. Was I raising someone else's child? Or had I always been the only father that mattered? 3 days later, the results arrived. I couldn't open the email alone. We stood side by side. Probability of paternity, 99.8%. My knees nearly gave out. He was mine. Biologically. Completely. The relief was overwhelming. For the first time since the funeral, I could breathe. But relief didn't last. That afternoon, my phone rang. An attorney representing the deceased man's family. We are contesting the life insurance payout, he said. My stomach tightened. On what grounds? Undue influence. Financial manipulation during illness. Manipulation. The word felt dangerous. Because if this went to court, everything would surface. The transfers. The refinance. The 12-year affair. Public record. Public humiliation. And suddenly I realized something. This wasn't just about love. It was about money. $400,000 forces people into battle. And I was about to watch mine begin. The court date was set 3 weeks later. 3 weeks to live inside a house that felt like it had thin walls. 3 weeks of neighbors waving normally while my world was quietly unraveling. I didn't tell anyone. Not my brother. Not our friends. Not even my daughter. Shame is strange like that. Even when you're the betrayed one, you feel exposed. The attorney explained it clearly. They're arguing undue influence, he said. That your wife manipulated him emotionally while he was ill to secure the policy. I glanced at her. She looked pale but steady. This will go public, the attorney added. Financial transfers, communication history, timeline of the relationship. Timeline. That word hit harder than I expected. Because timelines don't lie. They show where you were. And where you weren't. The courtroom wasn't dramatic. No shouting. No television-style explosions. Just quiet people with folders. His parents sat across from us. Older. Rigid. Angry. To them, my wife was the woman who stole their son's last years. To me, she was the woman who nearly erased mine. The opposing attorney painted a clean narrative. A dying man, a rekindled romance, financial support, a revised will, an insurance policy. Sounded ugly, because parts of it were. Then our attorney presented the facts. The policy had been updated 3 years before his condition worsened. The premiums were paid directly by him. The beneficiary named clearly, my son. Not my wife. Not a joint account. My son. The judge listened carefully. No emotion. Just process. What I didn't expect was hearing my wife's voice read aloud. Emails entered into evidence. Simple ones. I miss you. I wish things were different. Soon. That word again. Soon. It echoed in my head. Soon meant waiting. Soon meant planning. Soon meant I was temporary. At one point I felt something unexpected. Not anger. Embarrassment. Because as the messages were read, I could see the pattern clearly. He saw her. Listened to her. Asked about her dreams. Her fears. Things I hadn't asked in years. That realization hurt more than the affair itself. The judge ruled after 2 sessions. No evidence of coercion. No financial irregularities tied directly to the policy. The beneficiary designation stood. The $400,000 would transfer to my son. Case closed. Outside the courthouse, reporters weren't waiting. No one cared. To the world, it was a minor dispute. To me, it was the public autopsy of my marriage. My son looked uncomfortable. I don't want this money, he said quietly in the parking lot. It feels like blood money. I understood. Because it did. Every dollar carried history, secrecy, late-night texts, stolen hours. Then he said something I didn't expect. He helped pay one of my tuition semesters, he said. I turned to my wife. She nodded slowly. I told you it was a scholarship. I felt a strange mixture of anger and confusion. So the man I hated had helped fund my son's education. The same son he may have wondered about. Life doesn't split cleanly into villains and heroes. Tangles. That night, after the case closed, the house felt heavier. We had won legally, but emotionally, we were suspended. I asked her the question that had been waiting. When were you going to leave? She didn't look surprised. When he was stable, she said. Stable. He had cancer. She meant financially stable, emotionally stable, ready. I had been the bridge, the safety net, the one holding the structure until she was ready to step off. Would you have told me first? I asked. Yes, she said. When? When I couldn't lie anymore. That answer sat with me, because technically, she hadn't lied that morning. She had just withheld. And withholding over 12 years feels worse than a single lie. For the first time since the funeral, I slept in the guest room. Not dramatically, just quietly. Distance felt necessary. Not punishment. Space. I called my own attorney the next day. Not about divorce. About liability. Could I sue for misused marital funds? I asked. Yes, he said. You could. The transfers were documented. The refinance linked. I had grounds. Legally, I could dismantle her financially. And for a brief moment I wanted to. Not out of revenge. Out of symmetry. Because if she had risked my life quietly, why shouldn't I respond loudly? But that evening, my son sat down across from me. I don't want to lose both of you, he said. That sentence cut through everything. Because this wasn't just about betrayal. It was about collateral damage. Every decision I made would ripple forward. That night, I asked her something different. Did you ever stop loving me? She didn't answer immediately. Then she said, I stopped feeling seen. That sentence didn't excuse 12 years. But it reframed them. Because invisibility is slow. And people don't explode from slow things. They drift. The money transferred into a temporary account under my son's name. Untouched. None of us wanted to look at it. It became symbolic. Not wealth. Not victory. Cost. The court case ended the legal conflict. But it started something deeper. Because now the affair wasn't secret. It wasn't theoretical. It was documented. Stamped. Archived. And we had to decide what to do with that truth. After the court ended, the silence got louder. No more lawyers. No more paperwork. No more waiting for results. Just us. And the truth. The house didn't feel broken. Felt exposed. Like someone had peeled back the drywall and left the wiring visible. We moved around each other carefully. Polite. Measured. Two people who had shared 32 years but were suddenly unsure who the other one really was. I started waking up at 3 a.m. Not thinking about her. Thinking about myself. Who had I been these past 12 years? A husband? Provider? A placeholder? That question sat heavy. Because betrayal doesn't just make you question your partner. It makes you question your worth. I replayed memories differently now. Times she said she was meeting friends. Times she seemed distracted at dinner. Times she asked if I'd be home late, and sounded almost relieved when I said yes. The signs were subtle, but they were there, and I had chosen comfort over curiosity, because curiosity risks collapse. One night, sitting across from her at the kitchen table, I said something I hadn't planned. "I think I stopped seeing you." She looked up slowly. "You did," she said. No anger, just fact. "When did it happen?" I asked. She thought for a long time. "After the kids left," she said. "The house got quiet. You filled the quiet with work." She wasn't wrong. When the noise of parenting disappears, couples are left facing each other. And sometimes they don't recognize what they see. "I felt invisible," she continued. "Not unloved. Invisible." That word hit differently. Invisible means present, but unnoticed. Needed, but not chosen. "He remembered who I was at 20, she said softly. "He remembered my laugh, my dreams, things I had stopped talking about." I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness. Understanding. Understanding doesn't erase betrayal, but it adds depth to it. That night I walked alone for over an hour. Cold air. Empty sidewalks. And I realized something uncomfortable. I had built my identity around responsibility, not desire. I was the stable one, the predictable one, the safe one. I stopped asking what she wanted, because I assumed what we had was enough. The therapist we started seeing asked me a question I didn't expect. If she had left, who would you be? I didn't have an answer, because for 32 years, I had been her husband. If that disappeared, what remained? Retirement plans? A quiet house? A man who hadn't asked himself what he wanted in decades. The truth was, I had been aging quietly, and aging can feel like fading. Maybe she wasn't the only one afraid of becoming invisible. One evening, about 4 months after the funeral, I asked her something I hadn't been brave enough to say before. If he hadn't died, would you have chosen him? She didn't rush her answer this time. She looked at me, really looked at me. "I thought I would," she said, "but I don't know if I would have." That was different. Earlier, she had been certain. Now she wasn't. Death had removed fantasy. Fantasy is easier than reality. Reality includes bills, laundry, aging, grief, compromise. "I was in love with who I was with him," she admitted. "That's not the same as wanting to live that life forever." That sentence stayed with me, because maybe what she was chasing wasn't a man. It was youth, possibility, a version of herself that hadn't felt worn down. The $400,000 sat untouched. We agreed to move it into a trust for future grandchildren. Not to erase what happened, but to remove it as a daily reminder. Money can anchor resentment. We didn't want it anchoring us. One night I almost left. I had packed a bag. Nothing dramatic, just enough clothes for a week. I stood in the hallway holding it, and realized something. Leaving wouldn't undo 12 years. Staying wouldn't either. The only real question was, do I want to rebuild? Or do I want to protect my pride? She found me standing there. She didn't beg, didn't cry. She just asked, "What do you want?" Not, "Will you stay?" Not, "Do you forgive me?" "What do you want?" That question forced me to think beyond betrayal, beyond ego, beyond humiliation. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want headlines. I didn't want to start over at 63. I wanted something honest, even if it was scarred. I want to be chosen, I said. She stepped closer. I'm choosing you, she replied. Not because he died. Not because she had nowhere else to go. But because the illusion had ended. And reality remained. Trust after betrayal isn't blind. It's deliberate. You choose it each day. Or you don't. 6 months later, we sat in the backyard one evening. No ceremony. No dramatic vows. Just two aging people who had seen the worst of each other. Do you regret him? I asked. She thought carefully. I regret the secrecy, she said. I regret the hurt. But I don't regret realizing I was disappearing. That honesty mattered. Because it meant the problem wasn't him. It was stagnation. And here's what I learned. Affairs don't destroy long marriages overnight. Silence does. Assumptions do. The slow erosion of curiosity does. The funeral didn't end my marriage. The lies nearly did. The truth forced us to decide who we wanted to become next. In long marriages, love isn't just about loyalty. It's about attention. The moment you stop seeing each other, someone else might. And sometimes the only way to survive betrayal is to rebuild with eyes open.